know what I expected from Alien Isolation. I expected a cinematic continuation of the sudden cliffhanger ending. I didn't get anything remotely like that from the DLC. Instead, the 5 pieces of DLC for Alien Isolation are more like arcade challenges that expand and perfect the game's mechanical systems, providing on-demand slices of the campaign's many varieties of encounter. It's disappointing that the ending of Isolation really was the game's ultimate climax. It's kind of a predictable flat note, so much so that I totally assumed that a big piece of the ending had been snipped off for use as DLC later on. Nope. It makes me enjoy the campaign less. But these DLCs make me love the game itself even more. They're a remarkable collection of maps, and the way they challenge a player is much more self-conscious as a game and not a cinematic experience, but they pull off the remarkable feat of not losing an ounce of tension in the process of converting. You might not expect them to succeed that way, and I think that may be why no one's really talking about them very much. Basement, the original Survivor mode map, is not especially charismatic. It felt tacked on to the original game, a kinda quick and simple way to experience the game's mechanics in a more gamified, points-driven way. In a Survivor mode map, you have a point total that steadily decreases over time, and bonus objectives you can complete to bring the score back up again, supposing it doesn't take you too long to get the bonus objectives, which also decrease over time in terms of point worth. Along the way, you face the alien nemesis on a locked difficulty. Locked on hard, it feels like, but I'm not entirely sure. In any case, it's kind of a cool concept, an arcade exploration of the systems of distraction and misdirection and savage pants-shitting terror that made the main campaign so consistently engaging. Basement was a boring map, though. It felt disconnected. And the leaderboard scores were all supernaturally high if you're not really that good at stealth games, and I'm pretty average at best, so there really wasn't a feeling of reasonable competition. If they had some kind of fixed rating, good, average, poor, something like that, I might have felt more invested in the score, but as it is, the competition is just about what players have figured out the exact science of a map, which turns out to be the most delightful thing about Survivor mode. The main campaign of Isolation made me feel like I was playing something extremely contemporary, a slick, polished, still story-driven experience using all the bells and whistles of modern production. Corporate Lockdown, the game's first DLC, makes me feel like I was playing something for the late 90s, not because of its graphics, which are as polished and carefully constructed as ever, maybe even more so, but because of the way the DLC makes you engage with the level design and the game mechanics themselves. There's no map in the Survivor Mode DLC, no indication of where any of the bonus objectives are, where the way through lies, anything. It's down to trial and getting eaten to discover where anything is. Plus, there's a tiny thread of story and character running through the 3 maps of the DLC. They're meant to be played sequentially, like a trilogy of challenges. Corporate Lockdown puts you in the shoes of Ransom, the Seegson CEO whose greed caused the alien situation to spiral completely out of control. Your bonus objectives all relate to covering your tracks and erasing evidence of your involvement, all while trying to find a way to escape the station. In the first map, Severance, you leave the comfort of your spacious and luxurious office, which it looks like you've been holed up in for a while, and have to face the alien and a few extra surprises in the wandering corridors of the corporate wing. The next, Scorched Earth, is a tense cat-and-mouse with the alien through a laboratory wing as you attempt to collect valuable research to take with you in Cell. And the third, Loose Ends, has you disrupting communications and helps set the stage for the arrival of the Taurans in the beginning of the main campaign. It involves the androids, and later the alien arrives as well. You can play many different characters besides Ransom for this and for all of the DLC, and the characters differ in starting inventory to accommodate different paths through a level and different preferences of playstyle. Ransom's the one who these levels were designed with most in mind, though. The thing is, unlike the main campaign, you're not ever really done with these Survivor mode levels. You'll die over and over and over just trying to find the way to finish a map, let alone complete its bonus objectives. You're forced to become intimately familiar with every foot of corridor, each locked door, each entrance, and each exit to the vents if you want to score highly. Not even that, really. The challenge, totally independently of score total, of outwitting the alien and completing the map's objectives is a powerful draw. The fixed difficulty makes it pretty meaningful, too. I know the maps of Corporate Lockdown better than almost any maps in a game in years. Labyrinth shooters, like Quake and Doom, used to make me feel the same way, used to tie reward and satisfaction to map knowledge the same way Isolation does, but it really hasn't been since the days of Labyrinth shooters that I felt the same way about a map. Trauma, the second trilogy of Survivor mode maps, challenges you to guide Lingard, doctor, scientist, and distraction expert, as she returns to the blood-soaked hospital wing to scavenge supplies, and then return through the vent system to the community of survivors she's taken up with. Reoperation, the first map, is probably my favorite in all of the DLC. It's just the perfect distillation of everything I enjoy about Isolation's level design. It's a sprawling, complex web of rooms and corridors, perfectly balanced to accommodate a variety of approaches and a variety of characters, in addition to the constantly roaming alien Alien itself. It's an opportunity to truly and literally play with the game's systems. These short but beautiful maps are great opportunities to get experimental with the kinds of approaches you use. And the more you explore the systems, the more you can explore the map itself, and the more you explore the map, the more fun you have trying to get past the alien. By the time you're familiar with Reoperation, like deeply familiar, you begin a 10-minute play session with probably a dozen tactical options, and every last one of them is still somewhat unpredictable because of the alien who, on the fixed difficulty, is a pretty sharp fella. Basement's failing was that it was boring. Why play it over and over again if it isn't visually compelling? Corporate Lockdown had a somewhat unique and compelling aesthetic versus the rest of the game. They were very much themed around Ransom's character. So too are the levels here themed around Lingard. This is Lingard's very personal nightmare, and it's a great one. The hospital has already been the site of widespread bloodshed, and the combination of blood, fog, and the heavy ominous footsteps of the alien has never worked better. Of particular note is the nursery. The first time I saw it, I died there, and it was a genuinely memorable death, even though, at this point, I figured I'd be more blasé about getting eaten alive. Even though it's a deliberately gamified, systems-based level, the art team made it feel like a real place, made it seem scary and sad in all the understated ways that the main campaign was good at. That the DLC can create these emotions within a 10-minute window is amazing. The second map, Crawl Space, is a two-parter where the first part has you facing off against dozens of facehuggers and an extensive ventilation system. And if you don't memorize where each and every one of those little bastards are, God help you. Then the second part throws androids and the alien into the mix as well. It's exhausting and stressful, but in all the best ways that Isolation encourages. Overrun, the last map, is just that. Androids have overrun your camp of survivors, and you've got to secure what's left, grab the personnel manifest, and move on. It's one of the weaker of the DLC maps, but even the weaker maps have a distinct look and feel to them. The next two DLC are for a brand new type of arcade play called Salvage Mode. The first, Safe Haven, lets you play as Hughes, the communication manager for the station. Safe Haven features 2 maps in which you must complete 10 consecutive tasks and are given the opportunity to save your game in between the tasks. Salvage Mode is brilliant. You get points for each item you acquire as well as points based on how quickly you complete an objective. Saving requires you to withdraw points from your total. Each task lets you choose between either the Bacchus Apartments or the Gemini Secondary Systems wing, so you get your choice between a residential or an industrial theme. You also get your choice between rewards. Each map will give you a different item or blueprint award which will impact which future tasks you're set up well to accomplish. Depending on what character you choose to begin the challenge with and what your playstyle is like, it gives you a tremendous variety of options. But the best option is to try to save every last item you acquire for the very end. I don't know for certain, but as the DLC wears on into later tasks, the alien's difficulty seems to continually ramp up. And then, on the 10th task, they do the unthinkable. They introduce a second alien to hunt you. Now, it's in the game that there are several aliens. It's only an illusion that you're being stalked by a single creature, but you are only stalked by one at a time in the main campaign and in the Survivor Mode DLC. Salvage Mode, though, you have 9 full tasks to acquire the tools and the map knowledge you need to slip past the pair. Except, I never did. I've never beaten either of the Survivor Mode DLCs, although I've gotten to the 10th task on both. The difficulty of 2 aliens at the same time is just off the charts, and in the last couple of tasks, the alien is an unbelievably aggressive creature. It's a challenge for players who want an extremely serious challenge from the game systems, and I think it's unbelievably cool that they released a mode with a fixed difficulty that's so high. If you beat Safe Haven, it's because you've mastered Alien Isolation. That's pretty old school design as well. Hughes isn't much of a character, but the next Salvage Mode DLC, Lost Contact, gives you Axel, the first person Amanda meets on Sevastopol in the main campaign. Believe it or not, Lost Contact is even more difficult than Safe Haven. The configuration of the maps leaves you even more exposed and presents even greater challenge than in Safe Haven, on top of the fixed and gradually increasing difficulty as you move through the tasks. Here you get the Lorenz Private Wards, another hospital map, and the S6 Emergency Power Plant, a heavy industrial map. They're both more labyrinthine and less forgiving than the maps in Safe Haven, the Private Wards especially featuring long hallways with intermittent windows to the hallway next door. If you can't put your finger on exactly where the alien is when you're trying to open a door in the hallway, you're about as exposed as is possible to be. But both maps are like this. You have much more exposure, and completing basic tasks requires much more tactical risk. This puts a greater emphasis on using misdirection tactics in addition to simple evasion tactics to get through a map. In the wards, you better make sure the alien is on the other end of the hallway if you've got business to take care of. It stays right on top of you generally, and it's incredibly sensitive to even the smallest noises. That's how difficulty in Isolation has always worked. Lower difficulties forgive the player for their mistakes, make the alien a little slower on the uptake, a little less aggressive in its hunting. None of those blindfolds are in the salvage mode. Here, this thing wants you dead, and dead is what you're going to be if you so much as kick the wrong can in pursuit of your objectives. Like the previous salvage mode, there's a number of different sorts of encounters, and the ones with the alien and humans at the same time are always fun. It's nice to not be the only one being devoured alive from time to time. But if there could be said to be an endgame in terms of replayable content, Lost Contact is it. It'll challenge you as much as you can be challenged, and if you rise to it, then you have risen above what the game can offer you. Even if you can't, the long-term tactical thinking you have to get into the groove of in salvage mode is amazing. There's a finite amount of resources spread across the two maps, and while some areas of the maps do unlock over time and yield more resources, if you waste a lot on task number 5, you can completely screw yourself over for task number 9, let alone task number 10 when the second alien is introduced. It's an arcade mode. It's completely focused on the game's systems with no plot. This focus, though, just highlights how amazing and engaging those systems really are. The final piece of Isolation's DLC takes place right before and during the main campaign's opening moments, where you, as Deputy Marshal Ricardo, track down the explosives that Marshal Waits had sent out with another poor doomed sucker at some point previous. Then, you set those charges and trigger the explosion that cuts Amanda off from the Torrens at the very beginning of the game. You can even see the Torrens out the window of the final map. Unfortunately, the trigger is the least impressive of the Survivor Mode DLC, even if it is, for the most part, the hardest. The reason is that it recycles environments in the main campaign. Damage Control, the package, and Blast Seed all touch on some of the locations you've already been to as part of its pronounced campaign prequel flavor. All the other Survivor Mode DLCs have very unique, distinctive aesthetics in each one of their maps, but the maps in the Trigger don't really give that impression so strongly. As arenas of evasion, they're incredibly competent, but the Trigger isn't visually memorable or distinctive the same way as Trauma or Corporate Lockdown were. It was also the game's last chance to address the ending, but it doesn't. It just sets up the beginning. Wouldn't it have been better to have a Survivor Mode DLC taking place on the Torrens, playing as Captain Verlaine, that sets up how the alien got aboard the Torrens in the first place? Well, instead we got the Trigger. After the Trigger was released, a new mode was introduced called Endurance Mode, which challenges you to play all 10 Survivor Mode maps in a random order. A pretty difficult task if there ever was one, but Creative Assembly has been remarkable in how supportive it's been of more difficult play. You may have missed the announcement, but 2 new difficulties were added to the main campaign in a patch several months ago, an extra easy mode and an extra hard mode. Salvage mode not only offers a tremendous challenge, it offers a new way of engaging with the game's pacing and the game's tactics. And Survivor mode, even the Trigger, is absolutely perfect when you want to play Isolation like a game and not an interactive movie. Would you want to reinvest all 20-some hours in replaying the whole campaign again? Maybe not, at least not right now. Would you invest 10 to 20 minutes in the arena of your choosing to experience the same nail-biting tension and exciting tactical stealth gameplay as the main campaign in self-contained miniature? That's a lot easier to say yes to. That's the idea behind Alien Isolation's DLC. It's a fantastic idea, and it's executed brilliantly. If you have the Season Pass for Isolation, you already have all 5 of these. If you don't, I really do recommend giving the ones that appeal to you a shot if you want to experience Isolation from an arcade perspective. It's weirdly nostalgic, and I couldn't love it more. Thanks for watching. This video is supported by crowdfunding through Patreon, and I'd like to take the time to thank some patrons who are currently donating $10 a month or more to support my channel and what I'm doing. I'd like to thank Cassie Bayer, Christian Zachariansen, Zoe Sheik, Pat Hay, Yuri Pednes, White Zero, Espen Steinsnes, Irvin, William Kreusch, Joshua Hartnett, Oliver Handlikind, Joe Wolf, Kimmo Heikkinen, Stephen Person, Richard Stevenson, Jonas Neefs, Akan Sealealu, Jonas Rack, Stephen Lark, Preston Allen, Daniel Zooks, Signe Jensen, Ken Young, Dalton Seiler, Nobody, Jonathan Fleickner, Sil Sengusta, Ryan Gunst, Brad Wallace, Connor Biblo, Kumarin Vijayan, Chocolate Cake, Annax of Rhodes, Neil Brock Fummer, Spyro Sedaris, Kevin DeBolt, Rob Clark, Matthew Lagden, Harlan McAvoy, Valentin Selesnyov, Jared Liebmiller, Michael Gillis, Brendan, Carl Gleason, Tim Marsh, Richard Williams, Jack Pointa, Tizer Vicarian, Doy Nunion, Dan Reeder, Jared Meyer, Justin Hughes, Aidan Kennedy, Florin Sabot, Krish, Josh Farkas, Ivan Marinov, Jack Brennan, Brad Carr, Colin, and Lars Ingvar Anderson. Thanks again for watching.